Welcome to 101.1 FM WBRULP WFOOLP WVVXLP Providence. I'm your co-host, Dhruv.
And I'm your co-host, Alejandro Jackson.
And this is the Outta Pocket Podcast,
where we pull conversation topics out of our pocket.
And occasionally go out of pocket.
So on today's show, we are at our season finale of season 1 of the Outta Pocket Podcast. We're going to be reflecting on sort of the journey we've taken over the year with the podcast, and talk a little bit about content creation, how we got into this podcast, personal experiences in the past with getting into content creation, and, tips for you guys if you guys are interested in creating content. And so, with that being said, let's get into it. So I guess, do you want to open with how this came to be? So I guess with the club fair that we had here at Brown University.
Right, yeah. So the beginning of the story begins in orientation week, or
pretty much pretty soon after,
where Brown had this big activities fair. Stereotypical colleges set up booths, all the clubs set up their booths, man the booths, do their own thing, promote their stuff. And we both went to this fair together, and we walked by the Brown student radio booth, and we're like, huh. I sort of always thought that, doing college radio would be fun.
Yeah. And my family talked a lot about how I should do radio because of my voice. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I was like, oh, what if I, was a DJ or something on, the school radio? But then we're like, that evolved into we should both do radio, and then that evolved into we should have a show together.
Yeah.
So we went to their info meeting.
Yeah, this happened. Well, that exchange happened in all of about 5 minutes. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
And so we went to their info meeting, trying to figure out what exactly we should do. Heard from the radio people.
Yeah, there was a bunch of training we had to go through, which I mean. So yeah, we sort of learned the ropes of, how BSR functions, and then we recorded a demo show, which some of you may have heard. That is also known as episode 0. Technically, there's 20 episodes in season 1, but 19. But we kind of count episode 0 as season 1, so there's really 20 episodes in season 1.
And yeah, so if all of what I just said happened in September-ish, episode 0 was recorded at the end of November.
Yeah,
so
November 21st, because it was the day I went back for Thanksgiving break. And I remember, what happened when we got back from Thanksgiving break, which we got a very nice email.
Yeah, that's true. That they approved our show, and then from there it was kind of off to the races with this whole thing. Yeah,
so I remember sitting in Andrews, and I got that email, and it honestly made my day. My week. But yeah, so that's how the podcast came to be. If we want to talk about how the name came to be.
Man, how did the name come to be?
It was because we were sitting in Andrews in the kitchen trying to come up with a name, because we had to fill out this form.
Right.
And we had to give our show a name. And I said something like, man, I really suck at pulling name ideas out of my pocket or something. And then I was like, the Outta Pocket Podcast. And then we were like,
yeah,
we like that.
That seems on brand.
So, funny enough, although I suck at coming up with names, pulling names out of my pocket, we do tend to come up with conversation topics pretty out of the pocket, yeah. But yeah, so that's sort of how, the podcast came to be, and
even in this short time, we've already grown a decent amount. Our beginning of our operations started
purely on radio.
We were recording in we'd have to wait until super late at night when Andrews was cleared out. Then we'd go down to one of those glass rooms and hope that the janitors didn't kick us out, and we'd try to record the whole thing in an hour. I honestly didn't really know too much about digital audio workstations, or so our audio quality on those first few episodes was substantially different than the sort of standard that we do it now.
We're also in a better space. We have
that's true,
a room in which we recorded, and soundproofed, and yeah, and that became a thing as of this semester, and building on that, I remember you and I, a lot of people asked us, oh, are you on Spotify and Apple Podcasts? And so I talked to my cousin, shout out to him, about making a website. And so he helped me out because he had mentioned the family group chat about his experience with that. And so he put me on the right path. And so then the website came to be, and then putting it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
And low-key having a website made putting it on the other platforms easier.
Yeah.
So
so that was, it kind of all worked out. And so now we're here, cranking out these episodes every week. But I mean, unfortunately not for the summer. Oh, I mean, I guess fortunately but I mean, you know what I mean. It will be a bit, sad to step away from for a little bit because it's something I enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
But also,
it's been consistent too. Like we've pretty much done it every week.
We haven't missed a week.
Knock
on wood.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Except for like spring. No, we didn't even miss spring break.
No,
we recorded 2 episodes that week. Yeah, you're right.
Although one of those episodes had some poor audio quality.
Yeah.
That was
R.I.P. the Focusrite.
Yeah, but R.I.P. the Focusrite.
I mean, like for the audience, I mean, we might as well just tell them. Yeah. No. So this is another fun story. Way back when we were starting the podcast and we didn't realize that Brown has a literal AV room
for podcasting.
We're like, man, we're just gonna have to get this equipment like started off the ground. So I already had some pretty like solid software that we could use to record the audio on my computer, but we're like, how are we gonna get a good mic?
So we took a trip to the infamous GameStop that we talked about in episode 3 from the Blizzard. That GameStop is...
I still tell that story.
Yeah,
it's classic.
I told it the other day. Yeah. But we took a trip to the infamous GameStop, and we found I would say old reliable, but to be honest, sometimes not so reliable Blue Yeti microphone that we
It's been pretty good.
It's been pretty good for the most part, but there was an episode, I think it was episode 1. We recorded an entire episode and the audio corrupted.
Yeah, man, that was a really tragic week.
The entire 50 minutes, so we had to re-record it again. And like Dhruv said earlier, this was like when we were recording at like 11, 12, so like 11 p.m., 12 a.m. So
I remember us going back through the audio, just like stressing out on like what happened.
Yeah.
And then I turned to you and you were like, "There's no way we're recording another episode right now. It's
not
like
tonight,
1 a.m."
Not that night.
Yeah, that's fair.
So but other than that, I don't mean to talk bad about this mic because if it dies on us now, I won't be too happy. But I mean,
it's a solid mic.
It is a solid mic, and it's carried us through a lot because back on track because we digress. But we're talking about the Focusrite and what happened with the Focusrite.
Yeah. So we got this Blue Yeti mic, and we've been using it for most of our episodes. But then when we first moved into the AV room, we realized they had an audio interface.
We wouldn't have to share a mic anymore.
Exactly. So we had 2 mics, and like there's this whole new setup, and we used it for a couple of episodes.
We used it for a few episodes, yeah. And it was nice. I'm not gonna lie. I got to sit back in my chair instead of hunch back over the desk. But I mean,
But then the Fire Nation attacked, which was a little problematic.
We still actually don't know who the Fire Nation is. But
the you're only supposed to use the proper power adapter, 12 volts of direct current on this, like the factory setting for this audio interface, and somewhere along the line that adapter got changed, and now there's like consistent.
The adapter caused the Focusrite to never have been the same since. So we're back to the Blue Yeti, old reliable. So. But yeah, so that was a bit of a funny story about our experiences with audio.
And that's why there's that consistent like 60 hertz background hum or whatever in episode
12. I think. The ocean one. No, I'm lying.
No, it is Real Life Bikini Bottom.
Then which one's? I thought. No, I think. No. Wait. I think that's episode 11. Because I think 12's the books one.
Oh, whack. Wow, is it? Wow.
Yeah.
No, but I know the hum was in Bikini Bottom.
It was in that one, but I think that was 11. Because I think 10 was State of the Pocket Address, 11 was Real Life Bikini. But I know 10 was State of the Pocket Address.
I mean, you know this better than me.
11 was Real Life Bikini Bottom. 12 was Reading Rainbow. And I don't remember what 13 was.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, so changing focus of conversation. So I do want to talk about, I guess, our personal experiences with content creation. So
I don't know, man. It's just like, this episode's making me like mad reflective over the last semester.
But I think it's good because, one, through these episodes, so a little insight. We hope to do a reflective episode like this at the end of every season. And, by the time we wrap up the podcast, whenever that may be, we can look back on these and it'll sort of track where we started and where we headed and where we ended up throughout the course of this podcast. And so
a time capsule.
Yeah, and I think also just talking about these things will help us realize what we can do better next time, like next semester and in future seasons. And so yeah, but we'll talk. I want to get to that a little more at the end of the episode. So talking about personal experiences with content creation. So Dhruv, I know you have, I don't know if you've spoken about this on the podcast. Maybe, I think in episode 6.
Maybe.
The Just for the Record. But I know you've talked about this to me, which is like you had a band in high school.
Yeah. So
you want to talk about your experiences with content creation in that regard?
For sure, yeah. So my I don't know. I don't know why, but in like sophomore year, I had a pretty strong kick to like join a rock band or something, or like make a rock band. And my buddy from marching band, Jonah, he was like, hey, we're looking for a keyboard player, we're trying to get a band off the ground too. And I was like, oh, crazy. So at that point it just became like cemented. Like I would pull up to Jonah and his brother Murphy's basement. So Jonah was on drums, Murphy was on guitar. We had our buddy Garrett, who was singing, and our buddy Malloy, who was playing bass. And so, yeah, no, it was a really fun 5-man band type thing. We had to chill for a little bit because of COVID, which was sus. But then, around like, I want to say June, July of 2020, when, COVID was a little less new, still not where we are right now, where we've been dealing with this thing for like 2 years, but, we put on our N95s and we're like, let's give it a go again. 'Cause our deal with the band was, we initially were like, we could do a decent split between writing original music and doing like a cover band to go like to local like bars or whatever and play gigs. But after COVID pretty much shut down option 2, so we really doubled down on the whole like let's write our own music thing. And we ended up putting out an album, like a pretty short album thing, I want to say like December of 2020 or like January of 2021. So it's still up on Spotify. Our name was Banana Etiquette. Shout out. And no, it was overall a really fun time. I guess in terms of content creation, I already mentioned how like, at least for like after COVID hit, we definitely doubled down on like, oh, we want to write our own music and like have something to show for this, to put it out. And that is what we did. And like one common experience that we have here on the podcast and back then is like, some days the ideas just flow. Yeah. And other days we're just like walking up to the podcasting room. We're like, all right, what are we going to talk about this week? Yeah. But like in the band, I remember our very first rehearsal, like my first time there, Malloy was just like, oh yeah, I got this bass line. We're like, oh, bet, let's hear it. And from there, we just built off pretty much an entire song in like one rehearsal. Yeah. And like we barely changed that song until I mean, yeah, we barely changed that song, and then one day we recorded it. But every single time after that, it was like this whole iterative process of like, oh, like we'd have ideas, but then some of them would fall through. Other ones we'd push really hard and like try to make a song. Sometimes, like for one of the songs, I was just like, I had this idea in my basement, so I'm like, I pretty much got the parts for everything. Like bass line does this, guitar is kind of strummy, lyrics do whatever you want, drums like this is the kind of beat I'm going for, but you could go ham otherwise, and like so yeah, like a common experience is between this podcast and that is like it was a collaborative team effort, right? And sometimes like some people would have certain ideas that they'd bring up first and we'd build off that, or like in the case of the song that I was just talking about, I pretty much had everything set, but like I gave it to everyone else and they're like, oh, this is cool, but you could change things here, and everyone added their own spin on it, and like created this like collaborative product at the end, you know what I mean? So like overall, content creation never happens in a vacuum. We all have our influences, and our ideas are influenced by that, and then I bring up stuff with you and you bring up stuff with me, and then we just bounce ideas off each other until something like sticks, and then we just roll with it, So yeah.
So I guess in my experience, I can't say prior to this podcast I had too many like consistent experiences with content creation. I picked up the guitar in high school, and so after that, my guitar teacher he's very into improvisation, and so he bestowed a lot of his improvisation knowledge upon me, so that's a majority of what I do when I pick up a guitar. And I feel like that's some creation in and of itself. I mean, I'm not the greatest, but it's something I kind of like will fiddle around with when I'm bored, and I'll just pick up the guitar. After that, I want to say, well, I guess the next idea that comes to mind, which was, actually, hold on. I'm trying to think of when, this might have been, okay, this was basically at the end of last semester, but I think this was actually, I think it was the same episode as the Workaholics one, but essentially there was a night where Dhruv and I made a song or recorded a podcast episode in one night on a Friday night.
Yeah. For your music theory final.
Yeah, so I took a music theory class last semester, and our final project was to make a song, and so similar to how you were saying, how one of your band members came up with the bass line, and you built everything off that, like I made like one melody and everything sort of started to like build off of that, and so yeah, we created that like music theory final project, and then and then we recorded a podcast episode, but I think my biggest sort of experience with content creation is for sure this podcast, and I mean it's been going for 7 months-ish, 6-7 months.
Wow.
From November to now.
Yeah, you're right.
And so let's do 7 months. And yeah, and like you said, it's a very collaborative effort. I think that sometimes one of us will have an idea, we write it down, and usually based on who like sort of carries the idea, because like for example, the Karma episode was mostly you, and that was there's more behind that, but then there are other episodes where like I'll have the idea, and so
like the Oceans episode, that was mostly you,
and so we'll just sort of just talk about this, but at the end of the day, like I feel like it's important. I think which we do this pretty well is like split responsibilities. All the audio stuff and basically all the audio stuff and all that is you, and I handle the website and sort of media output. So I don't know, I feel like once you get into content creation like that, it sort of becomes your kid. Like this is my like little child, and I want it to grow. And it also shapes a lot of how you see other content creators. So, we talked about this briefly in episode 6 about Just for the Record, but like, for example, music and like, I forgot the name of it. The like, damn, what was the term? When you like, when you can, like, you listening with both headphones and you can hear it on one side or the other.
Like stereo audio?
Kind of, but there's a word for it, like
panning.
There you go.
Yep.
Panning. And I wanted to say phasing, but yeah, panning. For example, like with panning, like, we talked about how like a lot of artists create their content with a certain, with certain little flares and stuff like panning, and you won't really, like, let's say you listen to a song with one headphone in, you won't get to hear that. And like, as a content creator, like now having created content, it's like little things like that you're like, you wish like the listeners would pick up on, or the viewers, or whatever you're making.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I remember like, recently Kendrick Lamar dropped an album as of the recording of this episode, and I was listening. I gave it a listen.
Like a week, maybe?
Yeah, it's been like a week, and I gave it a listen, and like there was a song with panning, because I made sure to listen to it with both headphones.
Mm-hmm.
I had
it'd be a crime if you didn't. Yeah.
And there was panning, and it added a lot to the song, and so, it's things like that once you like start creating content, you kind of realize like the effort that goes into these things. I had a conversation with a friend of ours, Matthew McQuistion.
Mm-hmm.
He's a student here, and like we talked about producing music and all that goes into that. He's a one-man band, and he makes and I think he makes some really good stuff. So
yeah.
And so after like talking about all that goes into content creation, once you make something, although I would say it's not healthy to get caught up in the numbers, you do have this this want for your content to get out there and for it to be shared with people, just because you're passionate about it and it's something you enjoy doing, and you want others to be able to give it a listen or give it a look, or and so marketing is a big part.
Mm-hmm.
Or like getting your content out there. I know we have an Instagram we talk about, we have our website, and we're like on different platforms, and I know that one thing that you and I have talked about is like Charlie Puth and Light Switch, which you talked about we talked about how...
Have we talked about this on the show before?
No.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's another thing with this show. I started getting confused whether I had a conversation with you on the show or like off the show.
That is true, yeah.
But yeah, one thing I was saying about this, so for those of you who don't know, Charlie Puth, really big, super famous pop star right now. He came out with the song Light Switch around like December-ish, January maybe, and it's a good song, not gonna lie. Like, not my favorite Puth song, but it's definitely like on my workout playlist, But one thing that he did really differently with the song was like starting in like the summer of 2021, he had come up with this idea on his TikTok, and he's like, oh, what if we have a song that goes like and then like he would like show him putting that into Ableton, and then it'd be like, and then the guitars go, and then he'd be like, and then the bass goes, and then he'll be like, but we just need a sound, and then he's like, oh, great idea, and he uses this Light Switch sound. That TikTok blew up and got viral, and then he had a series of TikToks following, like tracking the progression of him producing that song, because like dude's home studio, it's nice. He's got like keyboards and synths like lining up everything, and I'm pretty sure he produces a lot of his own stuff. Like that's another like quick tangent. I have crazy amounts of like respect for Charlie Puth, because that man has the compositional chops. He can sing like nobody's business. He has crazy amount of like technical chops too that no one really talks about. And on top of that, he has production chops, and he could put it all together and make it sound nice. But he also, like, you're not gonna expect, people like that can go on and like, create like next level like avant-garde music, or they could like make pop music and make a crap load of money, and that's exactly what Charlie's doing. And I haven't I don't lose respect for him over that. I think like given his like skill set and his talent, like I think why not make pop music and make a buck? Like it still sounds great. But yeah, I digress. But the whole point of that conversation was like I was talking to you about this. I feel like that really changed and affected the way that like and like this growing trend of producers and whatever being on social media really changes the way that like specifically music content creation, but you know it could also be applied to other forms of content creation in a broader sense, is interacting with its audience these days. Like people who normally don't know about that side of the industry like get to see firsthand like you know the composition of a big pop song, and the artist is obviously super charismatic and he's like bringing you into his own like compositional process, I guess. So in some ways it really democratizes music and music production, and that's a trend that we've been seeing in general with music. I've probably talked about this on episode 6, but like on the and secondly it sort of I feel like I would make the claim, or at least make a little bit of an argument, that it makes artists' intent slightly more tangible. And what I mean by that is like John Green, who's one of my favorite authors, as I've mentioned before, probably on this show, is he's talked about like how he doesn't really value artist intent because at the end of the day, art is not necessarily the piece itself, but the interaction between an audience or a viewer or a reader with that piece of art. So if the artist intended something or the author intended something and then the audience picks up something completely different, then if you're going to an argument like who's to say who's right?
Yeah.
It's the audience because, as you've told me before, perception is reality. But by Charlie Puth doing something like this, or with, we mentioned this on episode 6 with Kanye making that speaker, that can like isolate tracks. Yeah, the stem player. You're getting a little glimpse into the artist's mind, and therefore you get to see a little bit of that artist's intent at work, which in some ways, sometimes influences the way you see the art itself. Like I can definitely attest, like, when I'm reading a book or something and then I hear, oh, the artists originally intended this or did this for this reason, and then I go back and reread it and I'm like, huh, I could see that influence here, and it's certainly important. But in terms of like content creation, I think it's sort of democratizing content creation in a way, but also keeping the artist's voice intact. I don't even know what I'm saying, man.
No, it makes, I totally get what you're saying. And like, I don't know if we have specifically ever talked about this before, but sort of like our intention with this podcast. And I mean, beyond it just being something that we enjoy to do and that we're passionate about, I mean, I'm sort of speaking for myself. I don't know to what extent this applies to you, but I feel like we have talked about this before, so I feel like it does. Is that like we hope that people take things away from this podcast, sort of like, some of the things we talk about, so like more serious episodes like the Workaholics one, and sort of we'll have to do some similar stuff in this episode later on. And beyond that, also just have fun listening to the podcast. Have it be something that like can make your day a little better. Just being able to listen in on an interesting conversation to stimulate the brain for the day, or like stuff like that, right? Like,
You think we're that interesting, bro?
well, I mean, I feel like some episodes can get pretty, like, I personally,
No,
I mean,
I
maybe
know. I'm messing.
I don't,
We get heated. We get heated.
yeah, I don't say this to, sound, I hope this doesn't come off as, egotistical or full of ourselves, but I think that, there are some interesting topics that we cover. At least, I know you and I try to make an effort to not just make every episode a cut and dry sort of conversation about the topic. So right, so like we'll try to like incorporate articles or stuff, like with the hobbies one, we tried our best to like make that one fun and interesting. And I really liked how that episode turned out, simply because of the dynamic between you, Rohan, and I. Like, I think that dynamic it works really well. And so we started hitting points that we never thought we'd even talk about. But like you were saying earlier, that intent of mine, of ours, like, may not come through, just like by listening to the podcast. It, like, people could perceive it as, we put out this podcast because we wanted to be a part of BSR, or like, because we got bored or something. I don't know. But no, it's genuinely out of interest and out of wanting to create something for people to enjoy. I mean, ultimately, as a content creator, you're creating something for consumption, and so I do try my best to put in as much of a quality performance as I can, although I know that my voice does not project a lot. So pardon all the episodes in season 1 where everyone was struggling to hear what I was saying. I'm working on it. But yeah, so when you're talking about like Charlie Puth and the democratization of music and Kanye stem player, like, these are all things that I think, it's like, which we can get into this whole debate of like artist intent and like, or versus like what like consumers really take away from it. I think like all things in this universe, everything comes in a balance. Everything must be sort of a balance.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Yeah. And I think that, I would say, like, as a content creator, you do, like, let's say you create a piece with a certain intention, you want it to be perceived a certain way. We're all human, right? You create something, and I think it's perfectly valid to want it consumed a certain way, or like to be listened to a certain way, to have a certain message be taken away from it, but you can't guarantee that. I think the democratization of music does that a little, like emphasizes that, like sort of carries that a little further. It allows artist intent to come through more clearly, in my opinion. Like, with Kanye stem player, right? You isolate a track and you may be able to hear like things that you like wouldn't have been able to notice before. And then you like can be like, oh hey, like, Kanye really wanted to do this on the track, and I'm pretty sure that thing works for like any song, right? So like any artist, you can be like, hey, like, I've never noticed this before, right? And so you get a little more insight into the mind of the artist, right? So, and I feel like, the more I talk about this, the more I feel like the tentative episode name that we have right now, which I guess I will spill the beans a little bit because, I don't know, season finale, right? Is currently set as a look inside the pocket. And I think that, the more we kind of talk about this, right, and, we've talked throughout the episode about basically how this came to be and a little bit about a process, it really is a look inside the pocket. And I think that this episode, like, a lot of people can take away something from it, in terms of, like, how, like, our intent, our intent, how we, go about making these things, these episodes, and like, how it came to be, all of that. So
there are certain things that must remain in the chamber of secrets, though, because never let them know your next move.
I know that is true, and then obviously we don't want to ruin all of the sort of
the intrigue, if you will.
Right, but yeah, so I know you did want to talk about consumer consumption of content in episode 6, and we didn't really like.
I guess that sort of applies to our conversation here too, but it's hard. Like, You know, you and I both spend a lot of time on YouTube, and we have these certain content creators that we really follow around. Like, I've for sure followed around Ryan Higa for a very long time until he stopped his channel. I think he still does like Twitch streams and stuff, but I'm also like really big on the music side. So Adam Neely, Charles Cornell, 12 Tone. Whenever those dudes drop a video, I usually try to find time to watch it. SciShow, Minute Physics, a lot of science stuff. PBS Spacetime. Yeah, I digress. But some of those YouTubers have been very candid about, the system that is YouTube, and very specifically the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah.
Hank Green has been very vocal about, criticizing, because Hank Green, I'm a big Vlogbrothers fan, so John and Hank have been pretty big part of my life for a while. But Hank has almost fashioned himself like a digital media content like expert, just by virtue of being on the platform of YouTube since 2007, and figuring out how to get really big on TikTok, or like he put out 2 books, but I wouldn't really call that digital media, but you get my drift. And he had this one episode of Vlogbrothers where he talked about like content creation specifically on TikTok is like really scuffed in favor of the platform instead of content creators. He's had this criticism with YouTube. A lot of YouTubers have this criticism with YouTube, because what happened is YouTube had they started monetizing videos based on ad funds, and that really changed the game and brought a lot of creators to YouTube because they could get money for it. And as Hank says, YouTube actually does a lot better job of sharing that wealth with creators as opposed to like TikTok. But Hank has talked a lot about the financial aspect of being a creator, but there's also the sort of like the self-fulfillment aspect of being a creator. Because once you commit that hard to content creation to the point where it becomes your job, it's very easy to burn out. And a lot of YouTubers talk about burning out. Ryan Higa used to talk about it all the time. Another music producer, YouTuber who I follow, Andrew Huang, did an episode fairly recently. I don't exactly remember when, but where he talked about, the sort of evolution of his channel, and where there was a point in his career where he was like, I want to make videos for fun, like this is why I started, I just wanted to have fun and share content with people. And then there was a point where he's like, now I'm gonna focus on growing my channel to be as big as possible and make money. And that's what he's said was arguably the most successful point in his career. He didn't necessarily enjoy it, but enjoyment wasn't the goal. He was trying to grow his channel as quickly and as big as possible, and he succeeded in that. And after he did that, he sort of took a moment of self-reflection where he was like, I actually don't really enjoy this. I want to go back to having fun, even if that comes at the cost of, slower growth or maybe even a little decline in growth. I'm kind of just going to do what I want and have fun with it. And I feel like that's a very similar arc that a lot of content creators follow. Charles Cornell said the same thing on his music channel, where a lot of what he put out was just like meme content. Like his early content, the stuff that blew up and got viral and earned him a ton of subscribers, wasn't exactly music education. It was him like transcribing and like putting up backing piano things to like viral video clips. So like there would be videos of Cardi B talking and he'd like play music behind it, and it's really funny. Or like the video of the kid who's like, have you ever had a dream and then and you were like and then you could do anything. Like that one is actually really funny. I really like that video. But he's put out a video again where he was like, yeah, that got me really big, but it's not exactly what I wanted to do with this channel, which is to educate people about jazz or music. Adam nearly said the same thing. Adam had a different arc. He was on YouTube for a very long time before he hit success. And he said, like, he used to try and put out viral stuff, because that's a big way to get big. Just go viral.
Yeah.
Vlogbrothers have talked about this. Pretty much most major content creators that I follow have sort of expressed the sentiment of, at the end of the day, you can earn success by getting viral and going big and trying to push that envelope, but it's not going to make you as happy. But the masses sort of don't really care about artist intent or that side of things, right? Because videos go viral because people want to watch them and they're funny. So, like, I'm personally not gonna care. Like, I know this sounds rude or crass, but as a consumer of content, I feel like all of us have a little bit of, like, this is obviously a brash statement, but there's nuance to it. But by and large, we don't really care if the artist is, what they intend or think behind their art, as long as we're enjoying it, right?
I get that.
So, like, we don't care if Charles Cornell doesn't want, like, I'm just going to use him as an example, doesn't want to necessarily push out meme content with his channel. Because, like, when we see the memes, we laugh and we're like, oh, this is funny. I'm going to subscribe to this guy.
Yeah.
So in terms of, like, consumer consumption of content, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where, like, artist intent doesn't really matter unless you kind of care about that stuff, and the vast majority of consumers don't really. But yeah, in terms of how that relates to this podcast specifically, I've always been of the mind that, like, it would be nice if this podcast, like, blows up or, like, we get famous. Like, sure, who wouldn't want that? I mean, obviously there's reasons to not want fame, as so many songs and movies have stated. But, like, yeah, it would be nice if we had that little bit of clout or notoriety. But at the end of the day, I really just enjoy, like, talking with my friend, coming up with fun ideas, putting it on air, putting out some content, just having fun with it.
And so, a little bit of a nice segue, to not be cynical about content creation and the pursuit of content creation. And this is kind of what I talked about. The similarity of, the Workaholics episode and this one is that we want to sort of talk about tips that we have for content creation, because I feel like there's a lot of that I took away from this semester, having to have made content, on a weekly basis, right? What I've come to find is that if there's something you really want to do, you can, like, you will find the drive to, like, seek out the resources. I mean, and obviously, some people have easier access to resources than others, but, I would, to be hopeful, I'd like to say in the, majority of situations, there is a way to, establish the sort of personal projects that you want to establish, right? And so I guess I'll start with sort of my tips for content creation, but, outlines will save your life. Outlines are, great to have, sort of just, it's an easy way to put ideas on paper, and I think it's an easy way to create a sort of plan of action, like a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and then end a goal. And set many goals for yourself, right? Rome wasn't built in a day. You build a pillar, and then you build another pillar, and then you build a wall, and then you build Rome. But, like,
that's basically how Rome happened.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah. So you build a little fountain, make it look pretty. But set many goals, plans of action. Like we said in the Workaholics episode, to-do lists are great. Rank them in terms of priority. Blessing. It'll keep you on top of your
with the
stuff.
caveat that not everyone operates this way.
I mean,
this
yes,
is
but these
only what we could say what worked for us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, uniqueness of perspective.
We keep bringing that episode up practically every episode.
I know.
But that's because it's relevant. Everyone is unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you're putting content out there, like we said on Because of... No, I'm kidding.
Bruh.
I'm like, we're referencing all the episodes, this one. I mean, I can bring that up in a bit, but yeah. And then, you know, sort of, I guess, another thing I want to say is, when making content, right, like you were saying, it'd be nice if we gained the notoriety and whatnot. However, if you're passionate about something, you know, do your best to not make it something that you begin to do for, like, benefit. Like, I mean, obviously, right, it'd be nice. But if you're, like, passionate about, like, this podcast, like, you know, you and I are, don't feel like we need any, like, compensation sort of to create this content, right?
Mm-hmm.
We do it because we have fun doing it, right?
Yeah. And I don't know, I'd just like to raise a point that there are some people who, like, this conversation would be going very differently if somewhere along the line we said, we want to make this our career, you know?
That is true. That is true.
We are very fortunate to be in a position where, like, we don't have to make this our career, and frankly, I don't want to. I have other career goals in mind, as do you. Yeah. And this is just something on the side that we do for fun.
Hobby episode.
Yeah. Stop bringing up other episodes,
I mean, it's
bro.
just, it's a full circle moment.
That's
on
true.
The season finale of the Outta Pocket Podcast.
I respect it. It's like What If when they brought in everyone.
Yeah.
But common culture catch up.
There you
Shut
go.
up.
1 and 2.
But yeah, this is something we do on the side for fun as our hobby, and you know, some people just aren't in that position because they want to make their content just more in line with, like, their livelihood,
I think,
which is totally cool.
But even when speaking about that, I think it's very important not to get caught up in the numbers. I think that's super important for mental health, for, you know, yeah, right. Like we mentioned earlier, we're on Spotify. We have a website. We're on Apple Podcasts, and, like, you know, we try, like, we have access to all these stats, right? Of course. And, you know, like we said, when you make something that you're passionate about, you want it to get out there, right? But, you know, right, you're like, you're not gonna get 100 views every episode or 100 listens, right? So you have to. You make sure not to get caught up in the numbers, because it will consume you and it will start to affect your mental health if you feel like I'm not good enough because, you know, like 100 people aren't watching every, like, a lot of my episodes, like, right? It's not.
And that's also, like, that's another thing. Like, we can afford to not get caught up in the numbers.
Yeah.
But I feel like if this is your career, like, I agree with you. You still shouldn't emphasize that to the point where, like, you're basing your value of existence off of stats and numbers. But it's kind of hard to not care about the numbers when the numbers mean whether or not you get food.
Yes, I think in part it is necessary when it is your career path, but I think you do need to, like, people who are pursuing this as a career need to put in place sort of checks on themselves, right? To make sure that they stay healthy, right? You don't want to burn out, right? And you don't want to, you know, find yourself doubting yourself and the content you make because of numbers. But I do agree with you that, yeah, when pursuing it as a career, to some extent, you do need to care, because, like you said, right, if you're doing it for a livelihood means, like, I either live or don't live because of this, right? So but yeah, sort of that was a little bit of a, you know, when pursuing social media, you know, endeavors, like, because of the internet, don't get too caught up in the numbers. I mean, obviously, it depends on a case-to-case basis.
That was a flaky callback, bro. A little shaky, but I'll let it pass.
Full circle.
How many episodes we got left to call back? We could do them all. We can do them all.
I don't know. We're gonna fit the Osho. I mean, we kind of already fit the Osho one in there.
True.
We haven't talked about the philosophy ones, but I guess this is
part if you're philosophy for content creation, shout out.
Quick fire philosophy 1 and 2.
Nah, I'm messing. Actually, one bit of advice that I did want to give that I felt like was something that I picked up not only from this endeavor but seeing you do all sorts of stuff here at Brown, is that once we got it off the ground, it became very chill in terms of, like, every week work it into the schedule. This is just something that we do.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, it was kind of hectic. Why we were trying to figure out what to do, how to get it off the ground, figuring out our setup and what exactly we wanted to do on the show. And I'm glad that we didn't get discouraged or sort of give up on it just because you even mentioned way back early in the episode, we had to do training for BSR. It's very easy to just see that as an obstacle and be like, well, don't really have time for that, whatever, I just won't do it. But we pushed through with that. We put down a down payment on this mic. You know, it's like an econ, right? You got fixed costs, but like the more like units you produce, the lower the average fixed costs become.
Yeah. So for sure, like, you know, if you guys are passionate about creating something, you know, just really go for it, right? And just, you know, just sort of push yourself.
Don't get discouraged if there's like an obstacle you can handle and it'll just be a little bit of effort. Don't let like a month of grind discourage you from like,
for sure,
like
even 2 or 3, because like, you know, after you will feel very fulfilled, and I think fulfillment lasts years. I feel like this podcast is something that I will look back on like years from now and be proud of. But you know, I guess sort of in the, you know, few in the sort of few, well, I cannot speak, in the kind of little time we have left, right? I do want to talk about where we find ourselves now, sort of after
going into summer.
Yeah, after 2 semesters, done with our first year. We're sophomores now.
I also cannot speak today. I think I'm just really tired, but I've like stuttered and stumbled over so many words.
No, you're fine. But it's a more laid back episode, you know.
That's
like
true.
I said, I mean, I feel like any reflective episode is going to be more laid back. But we have nothing to do. We are going through it.
Bruh.
I feel like you and I both. I mean, I think we did a lot this semester. You know, you're in acapella. You did theater. This podcast, balancing classes, right? And you know, I have this podcast, the Cuban Brunoni's Association. You know, classes, right? And now we're done with our first year, and we abruptly got thrust into doing nothing. I am struggling to find work to do. I feel like I am aimless. Today we walked around campus basically for multiple hours.
Trying to kill time before getting into the recording
studio. Yeah. And so, you know, when it comes to workaholics, right, and abruptly not working, it's very easy to find yourself feeling, I don't know, just like antsy and whatnot, right? So, you know, when I mean, I still have to figure out, I mean, obviously, you know, I feel like you and I are both in a bit of a transition period. Technically, the semester's over, and we are supposed to be off campus right now, but we both have sort of commitments that we have to stay on campus for a little longer, and until then, until we're like settled in and back home, I feel like it's hard to make a proper everyday schedule for the summer, right? And so I've been kind of winging it these days and just going with the flow, and you know, it's interesting. Like, you know, when I'm not doing anything, I'm like restless. I'm like, I need to find something to do.
The way I've managed to successfully kill so many hours over the years is watch YouTube, scroll through Instagram. You know, the typical vices.
But even then, I feel like I'm starting to hit, like,
there's only so much.
The sidewalk's starting to end. What is it? Where the
sidewalk ends.
Shel Silverstein.
Yeah, bro. Real one.
Yeah, poetry. The only poetry I think I've ever like enjoyed. I don't know. I used to read it as a kid with my mom.
Shel Silverstein slaps.
But yeah, so you know, I feel like I'm hitting the end of that sidewalk with YouTube and Instagram, right? Like, you open it and you refresh. It's like sort of the same similar content, right? And so and just I'll be honest, like I feel like if I'm not working towards something like at least every week, right, then I'm like, at least, and this is kind of a post junior year of high school thing, I'm like wasting my time, right? I feel like I in my head I plan to do a lot with planning for next semester. I kind of have to, a bit of it I have to just do for the sake of doing it, but I have more free time than I've had in the last 9 months, and it's very odd.
I would almost say the opposite thing happened to me. Once COVID hit, like 2.25 years ago, like I was completely thrown off. But that sudden abrupt period, and then the consequent year, really burned me out because I was still trying to grind, for what seemed like little reward. But B, it also, once I learned to like slow down and take a breath, I realized that, it's okay to not always be chasing the next great thing. Because, I don't know, I feel like, I don't know, you and I both know we're going to be here for a while.
Yeah.
And for me, that sort of feeling has, I would almost say, made me complacent and a little bit aimless is what I've been feeling, especially towards the end of the semester. That's also because, like, there's a lot of weird stuff happening in and around campus. And, like, I feel like it's been a weird semester for me personally.
First year, I mean, first year, like, it's everything's so new.
And so that's almost, I don't want to say it made me feel complacent, but it's made me crave at least a little bit of time of doing absolutely nothing for no reason, while I just, like, chill and decompress and figure out what it is exactly that I'm doing and then move on,
Yeah. I think for me, like, when I am busy, I do crave that, like, that time to do nothing, but I think it's like when I don't have a choice, like when I have nothing to do and I don't have a choice of whether to work or not, right? Like, I'm like, damn, what am I doing? And part of I think what I want to do over the summer is work on sort of personal projects, not only to give myself something to do, but also because a lot of the personal projects I do are like, like this podcast and Cuba, the Cuban Brunonians Association, is like sort of give something for, like, it's sort of me providing something for people to consume. I mean, this podcast is something like people consume, and Cuba, like I feel like I have a responsibility to the members of Cuba to make it something very enjoyable. And so the majority of what I want to do this summer is work towards making these personal projects in my life even bigger and even better for the next time. Yeah.
True. Yeah.
So I feel like I will find myself doing a whole lot of just planning, making these outlines, ideas, right? Because what into the Spider-Verse, take a leap of faith.
True.
And so when it comes to planning events for next year, podcast episode ideas, other personal projects that I want to do during my time here at Brown, it's all about taking that leap of faith, and you got to start somewhere. And so I think this summer, when I'm probably the freest out of all the summers of my college, because I'll probably get into internships and stuff later, right? I'll probably be the most free now. Might as well start to plan some of those events, right? And while I have the most free time, just get that out of the way, right? And so that when I come back to campus in the fall, I can just execute these plans pretty sort of simply. Hopefully, we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm personally craving a lot of sleep, hanging out with friends and family,
is true,
and good food, and just chilling and watching TV. I also got a decent amount of work to do this summer, but I feel like it'll be all right.
Well, like we mentioned before on a previous episode, I don't remember which one it was, but I think it was the hobbies episode. But no, it might not have been the hobbies episode. But about the work will fill the time you give it. Or the work will fill the
I
time you give it.
think that was the hobbies episode.
I feel like it was just the two of us on that, on whatever episode I'm thinking of, but it was one of the episodes. And so I bring that up because I think, no matter how much work you have this summer, especially in the summer, but I feel like we'll be able to balance working with seeing friends and spending time with family and going places and sleeping and eating good food and all that. But yeah, that's all the time we have for today.
Well, as always, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
To the audience, thank you so much for sticking with us this season. And let's take them out. You've been listening to 101.1 WBRU LP, WFOO LP, WVVX LP, Providence.
Yeah, and you guys can catch us on the Outta Pocket Podcast website. That's www.theoutapocketpodcast.com. And Outta is spelled Outta.
Yeah, contact us on the website too. We got a contact page. You can shoot us an email. Let us know what you want to see. If you want to be on the show, we're open to all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And, have a great summer, y'all. We've really enjoyed doing this for y'all. And, yeah.
Catch you guys later and see you next season.